So, what is it about stars that we find so fascinating? For as long as folks have roamed the planet, they have been mesmerized by that starry heaven we see above us. 17,000 years ago, prehistoric folks painted stars on the caves in which they lived. A couple thousand years ago, ancient Greeks and Romans would lay on their backs at night and find figures and stories in that starry sky above them. Stories about lions and bears and dippers, large and small. And a couple millennia later, we still do that even today. We are still fascinated with that starry sky above us. Try Googling songs about stars, and you'll find about 100 coming up right out of the bat. Eric Clapton writes this as a song: "If I could reach the stars, I'd pull one down for you." And there are people around us, maybe people you know, that won't even leave the house in the morning without checking their horoscope. There are scientists and organizations that spend literally billions sending space probes deep into the sky to peer the electromagnetic center of a star. In fact, it's one of their very first songs that we ever learned as a kid, "Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star." And yet, after a lifetime of looking up at them and centuries studying them, the best we still can do is come up with "How I wonder what you really are." But we really don't know. There's not a one of us who hasn't stepped out of their house, hasn't gone out of their car, hasn't left the tent at night on a clear night and not looked up and said, "Wow." In fact, I'm betting that as I describe that, you're thinking about a place that you go to see that starry night, someplace beyond the city lights, maybe up in the mountains or out east, perhaps. Stars are often associated with hope, one of the major themes of the Christmas season. But we're not the very first to associate stars with being hopeful. Remember that nursery rhyme we all learned: "Starlight, star bright, first star I see tonight, I wish I might, have the wish I wish tonight." What is it about stars that make us wish for more, and that we want those things that just might be possible, we think? In fact, Disney has built a whole empire around the same idea. Remember the theme song? "When you wish upon a star, makes no difference who you are. Everything your heart desires will come to you." Really? Generations of us were raised on that song. And yet, the crazy notion is that if we wish for something hard enough, long enough, it will actually come true. But is that true? When we grow up, we realize that the world doesn't work that way exactly. There's not a one of us here today that hasn't had hopes of something and then been disappointed when it didn't happen. Maybe that's something you're experiencing this afternoon as we gather. There's not a one of us who haven't had a hope in our heart for something good to happen in our lives or in the lives of the people that we love. Maybe it's the hope of a better financial situation by next year, or the hope of getting into that school that you really want to get into, or the hope of having and finding a more satisfying job, or maybe the hope of a relationship that will really work out for you. Maybe you're hoping someone you love will get better or find their way back home again. See, we all have these hopes, but they're not just about us. We also have hopes about our larger world, right? Don't we want the world? We hope the world could be a safer place, a more free place, a less traumatic place, a less place where everybody seems to fight so often, a more just place. But we know when we're grown up that just wishing on some random star up there will not make it come true. But what if I could point you tonight to a star that actually has the power to bring hope to your life and to even the world? And not just because of its mysterious beauty, but because of the message that it brings us. So let me take you back, not to 17,000 years ago to some stars in a cave, or just a couple thousand years ago to the culture of the Greeks, but to another part of the world a couple thousand years ago, to a man who wrote a document that we know as the Gospel of Matthew. And in that book, he begins with these words. After Jesus was born in Bethlehem in Judea, during the time of King Herod, Magi from the east came to Jerusalem and asked, "Where is the one who has been born King of the Jews? We saw his star when it rose and have come to worship him." Now, the ancient folks believed that the signs in the heavens signified events that were happening on earth, especially the rise and the fall of kings and of empires. In fact, according to one account, when the Emperor Nero saw a falling star one night, he interpreted it as meaning that his kingdom would soon come to a close. And so the next morning, after he woke up, he took all of his political rivals and had them executed. And so when the Magi, these wise men who were also astronomers, saw this star in the sky, they really believed that it signified something, the arrival of a king. Now, these folks, these Magi weren't Jews. They were scholars. They were philosophers, but they were well acquainted with the Jewish scriptures and almost certainly knew about one small prophecy tucked back in the First Testament in the book of Numbers that went this way. "I see him, but not now. I behold him, but not near. A star will come out of Jacob. A scepter will rise out of Israel." Now, this prophecy was written to people at a time of great distress, promising that a ruler would come, someone who would be strong enough to rescue, someone who would deliver them. And so when the Magi saw this sign in the heavens, they believed that finally, after hundreds of years, this person, this ruler, had arrived. Now, what is it that they actually saw when they looked up at that starry sky? What was the celestial phenomenon behind what we today call the Christmas star? I mean, it would have risen in the east as all heavenly bodies do because of how the world rotates and how the starry sky travels west through the night. But what was it that they saw up there? Was it a supernova, an exploding star, if you will? I mean, that's a pretty impressive kind of a thing to see and to kind of take note of. Or was it a comet, like the famous Halley's Comet that was shooting across the sky? The most common and probably most plausible explanation was that it was actually an alignment of planets, probably the planet Jupiter, which was the largest of the planets and often called the king planet. And some painstaking research has suggested that there was such an alignment involving Jupiter right about the same time that Jesus was born. And it also turns out that when planets are in retrograde, and don't ask me to explain that tonight, they appear to be not moving and to be standing still in the sky. But the real truth is, we don't know exactly what it was they saw. But whatever it was enough to get their attention and to raise all kinds of questions in their heart. And isn't that what stars do for us when we step out and look up at that night sky from the car or from the tent or wherever we might be? Don't we say to ourselves, wow, and then the next thought is, what's going on out there? Who or what is behind all of this? Is there more going on in our universe? Is there more to life than meets the eye? See, stars have a way of raising all kinds of questions about our lives and about our existence. The night sky was so dark and so vast and so lonely. And yet, when we see those stars out there, coming from a billion miles away, from a ball of fire out there, that light, it reaches us. It finds us on that campsite or on that mountain lodge or on the back deck of our house. It finds us there, and suddenly that night sky isn't quite so dark. That night sky is a bit more familiar. When our kids were young, I remember teaching them to find the constellation Orion in the winter sky. Orion, the great hunter, as he's known, is really one of the easiest constellations to identify because of the 3 stars in the center that make up the belt of the hunter. And I remember them stepping out of the car or the house and saying, "Look, Dad, there he is." And suddenly there was that friend in the sky. And the night sky was just a little bit less frightening. I mean, imagine a sky without stars. How dark and lonely and unfamiliar. Albert Einstein once famously said, "The most important question facing humans is this: is the universe friendly? Is there something or someone out there who wants to be known? Is there some larger purpose to human existence, and does it somehow include us?" Well, it's questions like that, and so many others, that must have been stirred in the hearts of those magi when they saw that star in the sky. In fact, it so stirred them that they couldn't sit still. They had to find out, and so they trekked hundreds of miles across the desert. They followed that star as it traveled westward, and they ended up in the land of Judea, to the place in the Jewish kind of world where kings were born, the city, the holy city of Jerusalem, the logical place for a king to arrive. But when they got there, the only king that they found was a mean-spirited and small-minded man by the name of Herod, who inspired more fear than hope. They quickly got what information they could from him, and with the help of the star, they found their way to Bethlehem, a small village south of Jerusalem. And so this is what Matthew tells us after that. After they had heard the king, they went on their way, and the star that they had seen when it rose went ahead of them until they stopped over the place where the child was. And when they saw the star, they were overjoyed. And on coming to the house, they saw the child with his mother Mary, and they bowed down and worshiped him. Now again, we can't know or explain exactly what happened here. I mean, did that star literally or figuratively stop over Bethlehem? We don't know. What we do know is that the Magi got to the manger and finally realized, once they got there, that this was the place. And when they saw that baby, they knew that this was the child, and their hearts, we're told, were filled with joy. They bowed down and worshiped because they believed that somehow, with this child, hope had come into this world. And so it is for the last couple thousand years. Ever since that first Christmas night, that Christmas star has been a symbol of hope. It tells us that someone is out there, someone greater than we, and not just a mighty hunter, but a mighty God, a maker of heaven and earth, the one who hung all those stars in the place and called each of them by name, that God is out there. But not just out there, the Christmas star also reminds us that he has come near, that he has come to be with us, that in the person of Jesus, he was born into our world that night in Bethlehem, and he came and brought hope with him. He brought hope so that that young couple, Mary and Joseph, who were facing such an uncertain future, still knew that whatever that future looked like, God would be with them in it. He brought hope to those magi who were afraid to go back to Jerusalem and encounter the king again, and so went back home a different way and got there safely once more. And when he was fully grown, Jesus brought hope to everyone. He brought hope to the hungry by feeding them and multiplying the bread and the fish. He brought hope to the oppressed when he promised them a place in his kingdom. He brought hope to the sick when he healed all kinds of people of disease. He brought hope to a troubled young man who was so possessed by darkness, he was cutting himself with stones, and Jesus set him free from that darkness and sent him home to be with his family again. He brought hope to a woman caught up in a shameful mess, and whether it was her own doing or inflicted on her, Jesus said to her, "I have not come to condemn you. Go and live a new life." He brought hope to a grieving family mourning the loss of a young man by the name of Lazarus when he said, "Your brother isn't dead. He's only asleep. He will rise, for I am the resurrection and the life." And he brought hope to a bunch of small-town fishermen when he said to them, "Follow me, and we'll change the world." And he, that same Jesus, is here tonight and wants to change your world, wants to fill your life, wherever you might find yourself, with hope. He comes to bring it to us. But please note that that hope is not wishing on some random star. This kind of hope, real hope, is believing in a God who is there, who is good, who is wise, who is loving, and who is true. Hope does not guarantee that your dreams will all come true. Hope is the confident expectation that God can and God will do something good, even if it's not the way you thought it would look, even if it takes a while to get to that place. That God can and will do something good for you if you look for it. It's the knowledge that this world is not beyond hope. This world is not beyond repair. This world is one in which God is here, and he is bringing and continues to bring hope to our world. And he invites us to embrace that hope. I mean, imagine how dark this world really would be without Jesus, the kind of hope that the world has experienced since his coming, the kind of hope that was worthy of seeking and led those magi across hundreds of miles of desert to find it. It's worthy of whatever it is that it takes to follow that light and experience that hope. Maybe you're just filled with all kinds of questions about that, or wondering if he can really give you hope. Maybe you feel like you have more questions about this than answers right now. Well, that's what the Magi felt too. But they just followed their questions. They followed the hope. So we have a God that's not just out there in the starry sky, but one who has come near to be for us and to be with us for all the seasons of our life, the joys and the sorrows, the dark nights and the sunny days. And he came not only to be with us in that darkness, but to rescue us from it. So he came to take on that darkness himself. All of it, all the world's darkness, all of its injustice, all of its evil, including our own. He took it all and he said, put it on me. I'll die for it. I'll put an end to it. I'll break its power. And a few days later, he rose from that death. And on that morning when he rose, another star, our sun, the star, rose in the east as an affirmation of what had happened. And as Jesus conquered death and sin, he offers us forgiveness and freedom to everyone who will receive it. This Jesus who conquered death and evil offers it to all who will come. And so that's the message of the Christmas star. It tells us that hope is here, that hope comes to us in the person of Jesus, who came to earth that night and is still with us by his Spirit. And he wants to bring hope to you tonight, the hope that only he can provide, and a hope that lasts beyond all measure. But it began by him coming and then fulfilling the purpose for which he came. And the purpose for which he came was to take on the brokenness and all that was wrong with this messy, sorry world of ours, and to make it right again. And so he was the one who was put on a cross, and by his death carried the burden and the penalty for all that's wrong with our world. And so that's why we always celebrate the Lord's Supper on Christmas Eve. We remember that Christmas and the gift of Christmas is not just about the cradle, but also the cross. And so we're going to, in just a moment, invite you to join us in this. Just stay where you are. We'll be kind of passing the elements down each of the rows. And when you're ready to partake of that, please do just that. Because it was on the night in which our Lord Jesus was betrayed, and he took a piece of bread, and after he broke it, he said, "This is my body broken for you." And after supper, he said, "This cup is a new promise I make to you. Drink it, all of you, in remembrance of me. For as often as you eat the bread and drink the cup, you proclaim the Lord's death until he comes." The elements are ready. The hope has already been secured. All we need to do is receive it. Come. All is ready.